Today, we've spent time in Hartlepool to understand more about a town that has been represented by Labour for almost 6 decades, but is now a top target for the Brexit Party. And, in opinion, Sonia Soda looks back at the controversies and clashes in another election week. We're going to what sounds like a pretty amazing community organisation. It's known as the Annexe, and it's in Dyke House, which is one of the poorest parts of Hartlepool and actually one of the most deprived parts of the country. It's run by a guy called Sacha, partly as an open house to local residents. He sees 2,000 people a year. They help with food and employment, but they do some really innovative stuff as well around training local residents to organise in the community.
All right, how are you doing, man? I'm Josh. Nice to meet you.
Hiya, how are you?
All right.
How would you like to see Hartlepool portrayed?
I mean, it's interesting. I mean, Hartlepool is a great place with some fantastic people and really kind people, and they're really friendly. But it faces systemic issues. I mean, the government talk about left behind towns and left behind places, and actually, that presupposes they were ever at the same starting point. And actually they weren't in the same race for the last 4 decades. And I think there's a real issue about actually what they are is an irrelevant place. And we've got communities around this country who have been irrelevant, post-industrial coastal towns in the northeast of England have been nobody's priority. And actually that's reflected in the fact there's 6 jobs for every 10 people of working age. There's lots of kids growing up in really quite poor, financially poor households. A lot of love, but financially poor. And in spite of all of that, people do a huge amount for each other. We've got a Make Dyke House Beautiful campaign where people are planting tens of thousands of bulbs in this community. Obviously, austerity hit, and it hit hard, and people have responded by digging up grass beds and putting their own bulbs in to make the place look better. But the people have a pride in where they live, and they're trying to do the best in the face of difficult circumstances to make it better than it was last week, say, and possibly because they have to.
And just tell me a bit about the political situation. I mean, why do you think this is the Brexit Party's number one target in the country?
70% of the people who voted in the referendum voted to leave. The Brexit Party lead the council now, so it would be stupid politically not to try and get an MP here.
And I suppose then it's if it's because 70% of people voted leave, why do you think 70% of people voted leave?
Well, they had nothing to lose, actually. I think. And you've got to think, we were one of the first waves of universal credit. And universal credit and the imposition and the way it's implemented locally means that people have very little say in what they do. They're told how many jobs to apply for. They're told how much job search they have to do. And actually, if somebody turns around and said, actually, you can take back control of your life, that's actually quite a compelling. Take back control was quite a compelling message. But, if Deutsche Bank leave the City of London, do you really think people care in Hartlepool about Deutsche Bank leaving the city in London, or European medical agencies saying we're having to go to Holland? They have been ignored for such a long time. They had nothing to lose, and politics of the last 40 or 50 years, and Hartlepool hasn't received the same level of investment as other areas. We've got Crossrail at 17 billion quid, and we've got the northeast of England still using trains which look like buses. We've got a timetable which doesn't work, but that whole lazy side of they're all racist, inbred bigots is just so not true. The Remain argument is based on logic. People voted to leave based on emotion, and until you give an emotional argument why you should remain in the EU, people will vote to leave. They have nothing to lose, nothing. What makes a place? So we don't have a magistrates court. We don't have a custody suite at the police station. We don't have the civic infrastructure that you'd expect of a town of 90,000 people. We were told we were going to get a super hospital just between Stockton and Hartlepool, and inevitably they ran down the Hartlepool hospital site to the point where it's not much more than a cottage hospital. There is no A&E. You can't give birth in Hartlepool safely. Only 3 births last year. But what it means is that when a community campaigned relentlessly to save their hospital, and they were promised that they were either going to get a new one and that doesn't happen and that doesn't materialise, there's a palpable anger and a mistrust of all politicians. I mean, you wouldn't trust any of them.
You suggested there's quite a resentment with London in a way because of you gave the example of Crossrail costing billions and trains around here not getting updates for years. Do you think that kind of resentment's at the heart of a lot of the things that we've seen in recent years? This kind of imbalance in the economy?
Yeah, because I think that's how it manifests itself. The irrelevant class they've been irrelevant and they're not now. But
because of Brexit.
And I think that's possibly what was the kicker, that actually I can be relevant and I can have a vote that matters. And I mean, we had a by-election and there was a 16% turnout. For the referendum, we're a polling station and people come in here asking for the polling card. So the people who hadn't voted for 30 years were saying, I'm going to vote in this. And I think it was that sense of actually my vote will matter on this one.
If Labour were to get in, have a referendum, and it ended up being the case that you overturned the vote, do you think a lot of the people you see day in, day out would be extremely upset?
I think they probably never vote again. I mean, I've heard people say that if this happened, they will never vote again.
And the shambolic nature of it hasn't changed anyone's mind.
I mean, I've not heard anybody say they would vote differently as a result. What they've said is that you're all as bad as each other was all, but I mean, it was said stronger than that. And I don't know how you can't put that genie back in the bottle without somebody somewhere being really, really, really unhappy. And I don't know how Labour. I mean, they're trying to, the membership want to remain, and I get that. Lots of their voters historically are in Leave areas. I don't know whether Brexit is the single most important thing in people's lives, and this election will test that.
That's so interesting what Sacha said at the end about whether the election is all about Brexit or local services, because it does really chime with quite a lot of what we've heard today, including from that guy Tim earlier, who really, really wants to leave the EU, but also had that shocking personal story about the hospital.
Well, Tuesday I had a heart attack and I got myself to the hospital, and I looked all over that hospital in Hartlepool to find someone. Anyway, eventually I found somebody. I said, where's your reception? He said, oh, we haven't got one. I said, can I help you? I said, yeah, I'm having an heart attack. And she started laughing. Seriously. Then I said, no, seriously, I'm having an heart attack. And they had to phone me an ambulance from the hospital to take me through to Middlesbrough.
Has it gone completely?
No, it's still there, but there's nothing in there. Absolutely nothing in Hartlepool Hospital. They close you in, but it's everything. There's hardly anybody on the wards. There's no doctors. I say, I'm basically dying there with a heart attack and nobody at all, even in the corridors, nowhere.
There's no question that what's going on will affect what some voters decide to do on election day. But I think it's important not to overplay, the significance of every twist and turn 4 weeks out of a general election. I think what's more important is the extent to which what's going on now kind of contributes to the general sense that voters have about a party and what they stand for.
That was Sonia Soda. My thanks to her and to everyone we spoke to in Hartlepool, including voters, activists, politicians, Sacha Bedding from the Wharton Trust, and of course, Josh's family. This episode was produced by Josh Kelly and Courtney Youssef. Sound design was by Axel Kakoutié. The executive producers are Nicole Jackson and Phil Maynard. Have a lovely weekend, and we'll be back on Monday.